In an age where relationships are filtered through apps and emotions are traded like currency, Kierkegaard's view of marriage emerges as a tempest amidst a sun-drenched illusion. He does not speak of marriage in the language of romance or convenience, but as a sacred burden, one that strips you of your illusions and forces you into the fire of selfhood. To him, love is not a fleeting emotion or a hedonistic adventure. It is a decision, a choice, an existential act that demands the death of the ego and the rebirth of responsibility. While the modern world defines love by the flutter of butterflies, dopamine, and compatibility, Kierkegaard warns that true love begins only after all of that fades. It is not love until you choose it, without reason. A man who marries merely for the thrill of emotion still lives in the aesthetic stage, a stage defined by escapism, fantasy, and selfish desire. Kierkegaard does not romanticize this. He calls it what it is, a form of despair dressed in allure. He sees the modern lover as a Don Juan, a seducer who lives for the chase but flees at the demand for depth. This man is enamored with novelty, enslaved by the new, and allergic to sacrifice. For Kierkegaard, this man is not free. He is terrified. Terrified of repetition, of permanence, and of the image that true intimacy forces him to confront. Marriage, to Kierkegaard, is the antithesis of this escape. It is the battleground of the soul, where one either ascends to moral maturity or retreats into cowardice. In his framework of human development, there are three stages of life: the aesthetic, the ethical, and the religious. The aesthetic man seeks pleasure, evades responsibility, and fears commitment. He is the one who says, "I am not ready." However, the ethical man accepts duty. He marries not because it brings him comfort, but because it is the right thing to do. Not because he is perfect, but because he is willing to be forged in the fire of devotion. This ethical stage may seem daunting to the modern ear, for it asks a question that our culture avoids. What are you willing to sacrifice? Kierkegaard does not believe that love should be a painless experience. He believes that love must be a transformation. In marriage, you do not find yourself, you lose yourself. And in losing yourself, you finally become who you were, always meant to be. He compares the leap into marriage to the leap of faith into God. Both require surrender. Both demand that you walk without complete understanding. You do not marry for certainty, you marry for courage. And in that surrender, something sacred occurs. You die to the shallow self that seeks only pleasure, and you are reborn as one who lives for something greater than yourself. Kierkegaard's writing is brimming with irony, yet beneath it lies a profound reverence for marriage. He understands that the terror of commitment is not a flaw, but a sign that something sacred is at stake. He calls it the dizziness of freedom, the moment before you commit, when your mind swirls with questions like, is there someone better? Will I change? Am I making a mistake? These are not signs to run away from. They are the symptoms of your soul being called to something greater. Kierkegaard believes that horror is the precursor to growth. Without anxiety, there is no transformation. Yet, today, most people flee from this feeling. We have medicalized anxiety, numbed it, mystified it, distracted ourselves from it. Anything but face it. For to face it is to admit that love is not safe, not reasonable, not guaranteed, but necessary. The truth is, marriage, true marriage, is not a union of two people merely trying to be happy. It is a forge, a sacred laboratory where your selfishness will be tested, your desires refined, and your character molded. Kierkegaard sees it as the highest form of ethical living because it forces you to confront your limits, your shortcomings, and your illusions. You cannot escape in marriage, not for long, at least. And perhaps that is why it terrifies the modern soul. In a world full of escapes, options, and at endless screens offering a fleeting touch. Marriage demands presence, complete presence, looking into the chaos of life and saying, "Though it may hurt, I will remain." If Kierkegaard were alive today, he would likely be mocked or deemed outdated, rigid, even dangerous in the chemistry of desire. You would be ushered into an ancient discipline, a forgotten principle once reserved for monks, warriors, kings, and creators. For the truth he speaks about marriage is the truth our generation seeks to avoid. His call to commitment, sacrifice, and the painful work of loving stands in direct opposition to the dominant cultural narrative in which we live. A society of aesthetics, superficiality, convenience, and individual freedom. Every desire is served, every wish affirmed. We are told to follow our hearts, even as our hearts change with each passing day. But Kierkegaard knew the heart is a fickle thing. He warned that without anchoring ourselves to something greater than transient pleasures, we will fall into despair. And here we are, armed with dating apps, romantic language, and sexual freedom, but more lonely, anxious, and avoidant than any generation before. Modern relationships are a reflection of the aesthetic life Kierkegaard critiqued. Created, uncommitted, filled with escape strategies. Love today is often transactional, based on what you get rather than what you give. People stay as long as it is easy, as long as it is fun, as long as their partner reflects the image they wish to see. But at the first sign of friction, they vanish. In this framework, marriage is no longer viewed as a sacred covenant, but as a risk, a limitation, a responsibility. What moderns fear most about Kierkegaard's ideal of marriage is not only the idea of sacrifice, but the permanence, the forever, the burning bridge behind you. For that kind of permanence demands something our culture no longer values: decisiveness. And Kierkegaard understood what true hesitation is. Not wisdom, not caution, but fear disguised as refinement. Fear of losing choices, fear of closing doors. And ironically, this very refusal to choose leads to the greatest suffering. A life without depth, without commitment, without legacy. Kierkegaard would argue that the modern individual is trapped in what he calls the infinite loop of possibilities, a state in which we are always imagining but never acting, always planning but never committing. This is a soul suspended in midair, paralyzed by choice, addicted to potential, and afraid of consequences. You can see this everywhere, in men who fear leadership, in women who fear submission, and in both who fear needing each other. In this world, marriage does not become a sacred union, but a symbol of lost freedom. And so, we invent alternatives. Temporary relationships, open relationships, conscious uncoupling, all attempts to escape the terror that Kierkegaard demands. To love truly, you must lose yourself. Not metaphorically, not poetically, but in reality. You must set aside your need to always be right. You must sacrifice the fantasy of perfection. You must grow. And this is the wound in modern society. It desires love, but not responsibility. It wants intimacy, but not surrender. It craves connection, but only on its own terms. Kierkegaard's view of marriage is an act of surrender, not just to another person, but to life itself. It is surrender to the fact that growth is slow, love is difficult, that you will not always feel passion, yet still, you remain. He understood that most people do not reject marriage because they do not believe in love, but because they fear becoming responsible for something greater than themselves. They fear change, yet it is this change that makes marriage sacred. What Kierkegaard presents is not a fairy tale romance, but a map to integrity. He points out that commitment is not a prison. It is a path, a spiritual practice, a choice to shape the soul through patience. In this way, marriage becomes a mirror of faith, Just as belief in God demands trust beyond proof, so too does love. In both, you step into the unknown, armed only with will and courage. You do not marry because it is easy, you marry because it is worth it. For through the furnace of dedication, you become someone you could never become alone. Thus, the reason Kierkegaard's truth about marriage frightens modern society is that it forces us to confront the one thing we have been trained to avoid, the ego we must bury in order to rise again. It is not the institution of marriage that people fear. It is the death of the self, the end of their endless choices, the quiet and terrifying discipline of a love that offers no escape. Kierkegaard's view of marriage calls us to confront the depth of our existence. It challenges us to abandon the superficial pursuit of pleasure and to embrace the discipline of love, an act of will, of sacrifice, and of transformation. It is not the absence of choice that defines true commitment, but the presence of something far greater than ourselves, something that forces us to grow, to face our fears, and to transcend the ego. In a world that continually offers us new options, new distractions, Kierkegaard's call is one to stand firm, to commit to what is truly meaningful, and to experience love in its most profound and transformative form. For those who seek truth, who dare to step into the unknown with courage, let this be a reflection on what it means to truly commit to a partner, to a cause, and ultimately to the self. If you found this exploration of Kierkegaard's philosophy insightful, I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspectives are valuable, and I appreciate you taking the time to engage with this journey of self-discovery. Thank you for watching, and remember, true commitment is not an escape, but a powerful step toward becoming who you are meant to be.